Hey everyone, before we get into the festive fun, we have a bit of a downer to start this with. Hours before we started this very recording, we got the news of the passing of legendary actor and director Rob Reiner. We've discussed one of Rob Reiner's films on this podcast. One of my favorite films of all time, The Princess Bride. And that is only the tip of the iceberg of the many films he's directed that has become beloved by many people, including This is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, A Few Good Men, Ghost of Mississippi, and his most recent film, unfortunately now his final film, Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. But of course, he was also in front of the camera, getting his start as an actor. Of course, everyone would know his role as Michael Stivic, Meathead on All in the Family.
Yeah, and he even did a bunch of things that we have talked about on this show, including the fact that he played a version of himself on like Hannah Montana and stuff. If the only film Rob Reiner had ever made in his career was The Princess Bride, that would have been enough. Like we said when we talked about Princess Bride, it is a perfect film. You cannot fault any moment in that movie. I said when I found out the news on my social media, Rob Reiner is not my favorite director, but he did make the only perfect movie ever committed to posterity, and that is The Princess Bride. So it is tragic that we lost him, and of course his wife, Michelle, as well. We want to note her passing in this. We are not going to get into any of the specifics because as we are recording this, news is still coming out and we don't know all of the specifics of what happened. And that's not what this is about. This is about noting the passing of someone who really left a mark on our culture and on us as people. I mean, so much of our language, our jokes, our cultural touchstones were shaped by this man and his work.
To this day, there's, you're always going to have someone in the friend group when they're leaving say, have fun storming the castle.
Yeah. Or, of course, the I'll have what she's having.
Yeah.
And when I visited New York, I had to go to Katz's Deli, which is where they filmed that scene. And to this day, there is still a sign hanging above the exact spot where they filmed that scene that basically, I forget the exact wording, but it says something like, sit here to have what she's having or something. And it marks the exact spot where Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal sat to film that scene. So if you ever want to try to sit at that same table in Katz's Deli in New York, you can, and it's marked so that you can do that.
Have you ever heard someone say turn it to 11? Because this one goes to 11.
Yeah. Once again, this is Spinal Tap. Yeah. I mean, we talked about what we called one of the best legal movies when we talked about My Cousin Vinny, but Rob Reiner directed what is, without a doubt, possibly one of the best legal films ever created, which was Few Good Men.
You can't handle the truth.
There are so many movies that when you're like, let's talk about the best of the genre, it turns out that the best of the genre was directed by Rob Reiner.
The number 1 and number 2 Stephen King movie, Misery and Stand By Me.
I mean, those, we can have that debate because I loves me a Stephen King adaptation, but that is an argument that could hold up. Yeah. I mean, this is a man who could go from something as goofy as This Is Spinal Tap to something as absolutely historically important as Ghosts of Mississippi, which is about the trial of the assassin of Medgar Evers, the civil rights activist. And that is not only, based on actual American history, but it's an excellent and gripping film as well. And you want to talk about the exact opposite of This Is Spinal Tap. What a talent was lost, and what also a good person was lost, because I want to mention that as well. He was, from everyone who knew him, just an excellent human being. He was apparently a very good person just to be around. He did his best to be kind to people. We talk a lot of times about people in the entertainment industry helping others to come up behind them, and he absolutely seems to have spent his entire career doing that. There are so many stories of him helping other people start their careers and stuff, and not for, personal accolades or anything. It was just quietly behind the scenes, putting in a phone call here or a good word there. And apparently there's all these little stories that people never really knew of him connecting this person with that person and kickstarting careers of people you never would have figured. And then, of course, his activism. A lot of people don't remember, or if you're too young, but he was one of the people who fought the Proposition 8 in California, which banned same-sex marriage in California. He was always a big supporter of the LGBT plus community. He worked very hard for early childhood education. He worked very hard for healthcare initiatives for all. I mean, as far as we can tell, some people would say he was a mensch. So
thanks for everything, meathead.
Yeah.
And now for our feature presentation.
I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Merry Christmas, Kiki!
Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays Tuesday, and Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, what have you, to our listener.
This week, we are going to be talking The Santa Claus, the Tim Allen movie from 1994. Of course, the Santa Claus has become this huge franchise over the last 30 years.
Yeah, I noted to you off mic that we are now older than both the character that Tim Allen plays in this movie and also than Tim Allen was when he made this movie.
Yeah. So the Santa Claus franchise, spanning 3 films and a 2-season TV series: The Santa Claus in 1994, The Santa Claus 2 in 2002, Santa Claus 3: The Escape Clause in 2006. and the Santa Clauses in 2022, which lasted for 2 seasons. So it is interesting that they were able to take this concept of this everyday guy becoming Santa Claus and the changes that happen, hey, you have to do this, hey, now, you put on the suit, you're the big guy. Now you got to get married. I don't want to be Santa Claus anymore thing. I mean, at the time, Tim Allen was like the guy. He was a very popular stand-up comedian. His TV show, Home Improvement, was one of the top sitcoms on television at the time. He was an in-demand person. And, also he would do, around the same time, he would do Toy Story. So he became this, from a Disney network with Home Improvement and 2 big Disney franchises in the Santa Claus and the Toy Story movies. He kind of was the Disney guy at the time. So, I mean, it's been a while since they've seen the original Santa Claus. Doing this movie as our Christmas episode, it's been on my list for a very long time. I've never really watched the TV show the whole way through. I'm going to admit that. Kind of didn't have any interest in it, but I do know everything that happens in the show thanks to some YouTube videos, and we will be going through some of that as we get into the movie. But for the most part, we're going to try to stay in the realm of the first movie. We'll mention other stuff as they come up. I'm going to say this right up front. If you have not seen the Santa Clauses on Disney Plus, there will be some spoilers involving that show. Be warned.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you, did you go watch this in the theater when it came out?
I did not.
Strangely enough, I did. We talk every year about my general dislike of Christmas films. This was one of those where, it was like my father wanted to go see it or whatever. And so we went and saw it. When I was a kid and going to see movies in theaters was still new to me. We've discussed that before. Go back and listen to some of the other episodes for that whole thing. I would pretty much, if you paid for me to go see a film, I would go see basically anything. And so I did see this in the theater, and then I've seen parts of it, on TV throughout the years. But that's about it. I haven't seen this one in a while. So I had forgotten a lot of the nuance, I guess, for better or worse.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where a lot of people forget the middle part of this movie because people will say, oh, he becomes Santa Claus, and then all of a sudden he's now in the North Pole doing Santa Claus stuff. No. The actual Santa Claus part of the movie takes up very, very little among everything else. For a movie about Santa Claus being a real person and a person taking over the mantle of Santa Claus, this movie is mostly grounded in reality. Even tries to tell the audience that, oh, this is just a kid's hyperactive imagination. He believes his dad is Santa Claus, and he's starting to believe he's Santa Claus. And is it safe for my son to be around his father because he has delusions that he's Santa Claus? If we just describe the general movie, the general plot, and then show them the movie, they're going, wait, what does all of this have to do with guy becomes Santa Claus? And there's, a psychiatric test, and there's custody battles and boardroom meetings. And what does all this have to do with Santa Claus?
Yeah. The interesting thing is that this was not originally supposed to be a Disney branded picture. This was supposed to be a Hollywood Pictures branded picture. And we've talked about the difference before. But for those of you who don't remember, Hollywood Pictures was one of Disney's little imprints that they used to put out their more mature adult films. The ones that weren't made specifically for little kids / general family audiences. So there is a thing that Tim Allen has said basically since the movie first came out, and I've never known whether it or not it is a joke or whether it is serious. But he has said that when he first got the script for this movie, that instead of him startling Santa and Santa falling off the roof to his demise, that Tim Allen's character comes out with a gun and sees a man on his roof and shoots at him, which is what causes his demise. And he said he found that so hilarious he wanted to be part of the movie. Now, whether or not that is a joke or was in the original script, I don't know for sure. But the fact that this was originally supposed to be a Hollywood Pictures imprint, it makes me think that might not be a joke.
I've only heard it from him. Like, not from, like, the writers or directors or anything like that. But, you know what? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. And I can see Disney saying, hey, this looks like it's going to be a hit. Let's change it over and release it through the Disney branding. That gun scene needs to go. Because it's happened before. Just a year before this, The Nightmare Before Christmas was out as a Touchstone film, and then they switched it to be a Disney Studios branded film. So I can see them going the same direction of, okay, we could release this through Hollywood. Oh, this looks like it's going to be another Christmas hit for us. Let's put it under the Disney branding. Really push this as a family film. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that kind of makes me think that it probably really was intended something like that is because the writers for this movie, Leo Benvenuti and Steve Rudnick, with the exception of this franchise and the Space Jam franchise, most of the stuff that they've written is more adult oriented. And again, I don't mean that in like adult, in a prurient sense. I mean that in a, wasn't written for children. They seem to have started on the Carol Burnett show. They worked for Dennis Miller, that kind of thing. But then they went and did the Santa Claus franchise and the Space Jam movies. But pretty much everything else they've done was for an adult audience. So, yeah, I can kind of believe it.
I want to talk a bit about the director of this movie, John Pasquin. And John Pasquin was a director and producer for many TV shows. If you were watching TV in the 80s and 90s, you've seen a show that he worked on. Family Ties, Give Me a Break, Another World, 30-something, LA Law, Roseanne, Home Improvement. In fact, he was the executive producer of Home Improvement when this movie was being made, and this is his feature film directorial debut.
This guy continues to work with Tim Allen, like, to this day. He also directed and produced one of Tim Allen's more recent, actually two of his most recent TV shows, Last Man Standing, and then his most recent one, Shifting Gears.
Which is funny because Last Man Standing actually has a crossover with Home Improvement where Tim Allen plays both of his characters.
Yeah. So it's, they've kind of been working together since the 90s and keep working together to this day. Despite this being eventually a film franchise geared at children, Tim Allen, not really the greatest person to be on a set with children, apparently, just from the sense of he's apparently not very nice to be around.
I've heard that. I mean, by his own admission, he's generally doesn't care a lot about children. this is his own words, not mine. Tim Allen's own words were he doesn't like children, despite two of his biggest franchises being children's related media in the Santa Claus and Toy Story movies. Despite playing fathers in majority of his TV shows, despite having children of his own, he has openly said he's not really good around children.
Yeah, so apparently while he was playing Santa Claus, he was apparently more of a Grinch on set. So, make of that what you will.
Disney hierarchy had to pull him aside and say, hey, could you not swear in front of the child actors?
Yeah. There are a lot of child actors in this because all of the elves are played by child actors in this, even though they are supposed to be, thousands of years old. They are all played by child actors. The oldest one of the bunch, I think, would have been David Krumholtz at the time, playing Bernard.
Who's our age? So
yeah.
the age we saw the age we saw this movie in, which is what? 12, 13?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, we've talked about him before. He was in 10 Things I Hate About You, and we mentioned him then. And of course, even though we haven't really talked about it, he shows up in a lot of movies that I know you and I personally like. He's, of course, the love interest for Wednesday in Addams Family Values, and he showed up in Serenity, the Firefly movie. He's just one of those, once you see him, you're like, hey, that guy,
Most recently was in Oppenheimer. Will be playing Supergirl's father, Zor-El, in the upcoming movie.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. That's awesome.
But yeah, he does a good job. I mean, it's weird because, again, for a 13-year-old actor at the time, playing the straight man to Tim Allen's kind of snarky,
grumpy Santa Claus.
Yeah, it works.
And I have to say that the best thing about it is Bernard is the best character in this movie, bar none. This is my hill. I will die on it. I am not taking questions at this time.
All the more crime he wasn't able to do part 3.
I don't think I ever saw part 3. I think I saw the second one when it came out, but I don't think I ever saw part 3. And I have not. I've seen a couple of clips from the TV show, but that's about it. But yeah, Bernard is absolutely one of the major saving graces of this movie, because I will give it to David Krumholtz. He is an excellent actor. Absolutely just shows up whatever he's in. And this is a great cast. Can we just take a minute to talk about the cast? Tim Allen, this was his peak of his career. He was in everything. He was not the first choice. Apparently, it was gonna originally be either Bill Murray or Chevy Chase, but both of them turned it down.
I mean, at that point, they had already done Christmas Vacation and Scrooge. They probably said, I already did one Christmas for me. I don't really want to do another.
Well, apparently Chevy Chase was gonna do it, but then it was a scheduling thing. And Bill Murray, though, he didn't want to do another holiday movie. He was like, I did Scrooged and, whatever. I don't want to do it.
There is a bit of a shout out here, though, because there's a scene where Santa ends up in jail and the person in the cell next to him is dressed like Bill Murray's character from Scrooge. So there's a nice little reference to other holiday movies. There are a lot of references to other Christmas movies in the background of this one. A lot of them are you have to really, really, really pay attention. There's a few obvious ones like Scott and his son are watching Miracle on 34th Street, the original, on TV. There's a couple of references to other holiday movies like the Home Alone and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but you gotta really be paying attention. And even I didn't know a lot of them until you had sent me a YouTube video about here are all the Easter eggs and references in the Santa Claus. But as for the other cast members, Tim Allen does play Scott Calvin, and he has a bit of a rival in that his wife's new husband, Dr. Neil Miller, played by Judge Reinhold. who has been in freaking everything. I mean, where do I start? I mean, we can do an entire podcast just on Judge Reinhold's career.
Have we talked about Judge Reinhold before on the show? I can't remember.
I don't know. I don't think we ever have, because it's just never come up. He doesn't do a lot of Disney movies. At this point, he would probably be well known. Again, this is 1993. Probably be well known to moviegoers for his role in the Beverly Hills Cop movies, Detective William Rosewood.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Mm-hmm.
If you're our type of people, Gremlins.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of Christmas movies.
And of course, the culmination of the biggest joke is he did that guest spot in Clerks, the animated series, as a judge named Judge Reinhold.
Indeed.
Wendy Crewson as Scott's ex-wife, Laura. Again, she's another one that's been in like everything. She's one of those, hey, it's that person kind of people. Though it's really weird because they give her this Bob haircut, Bob Pixie kind of haircut in this movie. And she has a completely different haircut in the other two movies, to the point where people thought she got recasted because she is unrecognizable in those other two movies.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
I'll say that if you're our type of people, things you probably know her from other than this franchise is probably going to be, she was the first lady in Air Force One, the Harrison Ford movie. And also she's the co-star in Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams. So those are kind of the two big ones that you know, if you're our age and you like the same sort of things we like, those are probably the ones that you're going to remember her from, other than this franchise. But yeah, she is in everything.
And to kind of round out our main cast, Eric Lloyd as Scott's son, Charlie. Yes, he's known for these movies, but he's done a bunch of other movies. Dustin checks in, My Giant. He doesn't done a bunch of stuff for television, but he's really only really known for these movies. And he did come back to reprise the character of Charlie for the Santa Claus's TV show.
And he was the voice of Blanky in the Brave Little Toaster sequels. I mean, we've talked about the original Brave Little Toaster, but not the sequels. Two other people that are in this movie in smaller parts. Peter Boyle, who we've talked about before. The wonderful Peter Boyle. He is Tim Allen's boss at the toy company that he works at. It's not a big part, but, you know, Peter Boyle always packed a punch.
Peter Boyle will come back in the sequels playing Father Time. So that has gotten some fan speculation of whether this is the same character or not. Probably isn't.
Yeah.
But, you know, just to throw that one out there.
And then, of course, one of the ones that you may not know unless you're a movie nerd is Frank Welker. He is your childhood. Whenever Comet is making noises at Scott throughout the movie, yeah, that's Frank Welker right there.
If you needed animal sounds for your movie, you call Frank Welker.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks before we're recording this, Phelan Porteous and Allison Pregler put out a video about this. Shout out to them. Go watch their stuff. They pointed out, like, what is Hollywood gonna do when we don't have Frank Welker anymore? Knock on wood. Please let that day be far away. I don't think there has ever been or will ever be anybody who can do what Frank Welker has been able to do. So, yeesh.
So what is this movie about? Again, it kind of goes into tropey territories because we have our father that spends too much time at work and he's never home. Scott Calvin works as a marketing executive at a toy company. And yeah, he does all this stuff for work. He's never home. And it's probably why his wife divorced him, because he's just never around. His son doesn't really like hanging out with his father because he's never around. And little Charlie, he's getting to that age where kids stop believing in Santa Claus. And that's kind of one of the things he talks about, that, the other kids are starting to make fun of him because he still believes in Santa Claus. While Laura and Neil, they're kind of, okay, maybe it's time to be honest with him, tell him the truth about Santa Claus. Scott doesn't want to yet. He wants to keep that innocence, that magic of Christmas still in his son for a little while longer. So despite him being the overworked father that's never around, he still wants to do right by his kid and keep the magic of Christmas with his kid. So he definitely loves his son, even though he's never around. But yeah, the movie starts on Christmas Eve with his custody. He's taking Charlie for Christmas Eve. He tries to do Christmas Eve dinner. It goes wrong because he's Tim Allen. We got to get a reference to him screwing up like he does on Home Improvement.
Tim Allen's entire career has been built on, boy, aren't men completely useless? And this movie is not too much different, at the beginning at least. And there is a really dumb joke in quotation marks, where, he makes Christmas Eve dinner and he burns the turkey. And by burns the turkey, I mean it literally bursts into flames. And they end up at a Denny's where pretty much everybody else in the Denny's is single divorced fathers with their kids who all have third-degree burns from having set turkeys on fire. Which is like, did the people who wrote this movie think that turkeys are just highly flammable birds or something?
I just think it's a joke about, haha, men can't cook.
Which would be a thing if, most professional chefs weren't men. Yeah. I guess men can only cook if they're getting paid top dollar for it.
It's even a subversion because it's Christmas Eve and the only thing open is a Denny's. And as soon as they enter the Denny's, here are a bunch of these Japanese businessmen. And then the waitress walks Scott and Charlie right past them to the divorced dad section. Dad burned the turkey. Oh, follow me. They just have this whole section of the restaurant just for divorced dads.
As someone who has spent Christmas at a Denny's, not a bad place to spend. It does seem like the Denny's has been overwhelmed on this particular Christmas Eve because they are out of everything.
Like I said, considering most of the restaurant is filled with Japanese businessmen and the other half with divorced dads, yeah. I think it's just to show that Scott's lack of planning is just biting him in the butt. If he had not gone to the company Christmas party and hobnobbed with the executives, he could have gone home early, cooked Christmas dinner, had it ready, and then he wouldn't have been in that situation. But because he put his career ahead of his family, he kind of screws everything up.
Did he really not plan? Because he has made a multi-dish meal. Again, shout out to Phalis and Lupa for their video, because they do bring this up as well. But there are already all the side dishes and stuff laid out on the table. And because he burns the turkey, he's like, well, we obviously can't eat any of the food that's already on the table. Let's go to Denny's. If you go back and look at that scene, the table is already set with a pretty decent spread. The only thing that's not on there is the turkey. And honestly, okay, to quote Homer Simpson, it's just a little airborne. It's still good. It's still good. Well, except for the fact that he did, put it out with a fire extinguisher. But, carve away that exterior layer, probably the interior of that turkey's still edible.
And knowing the way Scott is in this movie, that would have been a very dry turkey.
Well, yeah, but that's what gravy's for, dude.
Also, he doesn't seem to have even known how to cook a turkey, because he looks at the recipe and says, 4 hours!
Yeah. Well, also, he's only cooking for 2 people, and that's an 8-pound bird. my dude, get like a turkey breast, you know?
Yeah. After all of this, he puts Charlie to bed and he reads him The Night Before Christmas. And he goes through the whole poem. And, since he is at that age where he's starting to question things, he asks, how do the reindeer fly? How does Santa come down this chimney? And a plot point that does become relevant in the movie, what is a rose succic ladder? Because he mishears it. And it's a rose such a clatter. Trying to explain, I heard a loud noise.
Yeah.
Which must have been really, really, really fun for the translators to make that joke work.
Yeah, it's a joke that only works in English, as far as I can tell. And I'm gonna say something. When I was a kid, because like you're saying, we were like 12 when this came out. As a kid, that was like the funniest joke in the movie to me. Haha, it's the Rose Succic Ladder Company.
Yeah.
Watching it again as an adult, I'm like, somebody thought they were like really clever when they came up with this, didn't they?
But if it made the kids laugh, and we were kids
But
when we
it did
watched
make me
it.
laugh as a kid. Like, I thought that was the funniest joke when I was a kid. As an adult, less funny.
Yeah.
But as a kid, that was the funny. Look, it's a Rose Succic ladder. Ha ha ha.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it works. I will say, we talked about Ernest Saves Christmas last week, and I said I did not laugh once during that movie, personally. As a kid, I found this movie funny to a certain extent. Like I said, I found that ladder joke very funny as a kid. But watching it as an adult, still found some laughs in this movie. So bravo to this movie.
Yeah. A lot of the joke, there's some references that are very dated, flatulent jokes, but all around a lot of the jokes still land.
And I find that I'm laughing at different jokes as an adult than I laughed at as a kid. Again, the latter joke, not as funny to me as an adult, but other jokes, I find that I'm laughing at them when they weren't funny to me as a kid.
Yep. Well, let's get to the part everyone knows. As they're having this conversation, they hear something on the roof. Of course, the kid thinks, oh, it's Santa Claus. Scott thinks it's like a burglar or something because, again, no such thing as Santa Claus. He runs out there. He yells, hey, you, at the pursued burglar. He falls off and you killed Santa. If this was just the one movie, I think it would have been fine. But the fact that they go back to this in the TV show. The thing is, it does now make sense with the TV show because, okay, this is the spoiler part for the Santa Claus's TV show for those of you who haven't seen it. All right. In the movie, we are led to believe that Scott yelling, hey, you, at Santa startled him, which makes him fall off the roof, and he dies. In his final moments, he is waving goodbye, and he fades away, and he finds the card. Put the suit on, the reindeer will know what to do. And we are supposed to be led to believe this entire time that it is happenstance, that it was an accident and it could have been anyone else that night. The Santa Claus's TV show, it was always supposed to be Scott. Scott was chosen a very long time ago to be the next Santa Claus, to be the first human to be Santa Claus, because Santa Claus is an ethereal being, multiple Santa Clauses over the years. In fact, they say that the Santa Claus that we see in this movie, the one that fell off the roof, was the 17th Santa Claus. And the legend of Santa Claus goes all the way back to the original St. Nicholas of Myra. And it is his generosity that created the magic that created Santa Claus that has passed through 17 different Santa Clauses up until this point. And each generation has their Santa Claus to go with what is relevant in the world. Santa 17 over here talks about his first era of being Santa Claus was the Great Depression. And he went through the Great Depression, World War II, Vietnam, et cetera, up until this point where he makes the discovery that technology is the new magic. People stop believing in Santa Claus at younger ages now. They're more into technology. Computers are starting to become regular things in homes. Video games, CD players, VHS players. We're just a few years away from DVDs. So he needed a Santa Claus that would understand the modern world and would understand the technology of the modern world. So why not use a modern human that would understand the modern human world? And he chooses Scott Calvin to be that man. So this was all a setup. Going back to this movie, that makes sense. And I shot it to you before we recorded, Kiki, of a compilation of all of the elves that follow Scott throughout this entire movie. At the very beginning of this movie, 2 minutes into this movie, we see a little girl looking into a toy store as Scott passes by. That little girl turns around and you see that she has elf ears. At multiple points in this movie, who we assume are children are actually elves, keeping an eye on Scott. And it's not until the end of the movie where all of those kids come together to see Scott as Santa go up in the sleigh, where we see the pointy ears, where we see that these are not children, these are elves, which now makes that this was all the plan. This was the plan to make this guy Santa Claus. The elves are not shocked that the Santa Claus that just left the North Pole is dead. That it was all a plan this entire time to make this guy Santa because they believe that this is the right guy to be the Santa for the modern era. You know, it kind of makes sense. And
it does clear up a lot of, I won't say complaints, but nitpicks that people had with the original movie for several years. Which was like, well, if Santa Claus is a magical being, how did he just accidentally slip off the roof? Because, like, one guy was like, hey, Santa, you know. So I can see why they did that. Also, the fact that when Scott gets to the North Pole and Bernard is like, hey, you know, there's a Santa Claus, you know, Claus with an E, and you should have read the fine print that you can't read without a magnifying glass around the part of, you know, the card that he picks up. It's just really weird, you know? And I get that you're like, well, you're not supposed to think that much into it because it's a silly little kids movie, but hello, if this is your first time listening to our podcast, but we think too deeply along. Yeah.
The fact that Santa had this very big plan to make this guy his successor, and how we learn in the show, there's another clause, the successes clause, which allows the current Santa to choose their successor, but it has to be an agreement, blah, 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 but it's also through the ethereal beings. And the fact that this Santa 17, went around all of that. Like, okay, I don't want another ethereal being to become Santa. I want this guy to become Santa, but I also don't want him to know that he's going to be Santa. I'm just going to have him just kill me, and then he just puts on the suit and he's Santa Claus. Legal loopholes among ethereal beings is a thing.
Yeah, but he does specifically ask, am I an ethereal being? And Bernard says, like, no, you're just flesh and blood.
And it is interesting that he is the first human to be Santa Claus. All Santas previously have been ethereal beings, and when their time is up, they go to the spirit realm to just do whatever. And that every Santa, every Father Christmas, every Papa Noel, Saint Nicholas himself are all ethereal beings, and they've all been Santa at one point or another. It is interesting in that there's a pantheon of Santa Clauses. But after that first night, Scott doesn't believe it. It's just a dream. None of it happened. there was a girl named Judy who gave me hot cocoa. No, Judy was the waitress at Denny's. No, where did I get these pajamas from? I don't sleep in pajamas. No, I'm not Santa. This isn't real. It was all a dream. And then Charlie is like, no, we went to the North Pole. We rode in the sleigh. It's real. It's real. So it's like, which is also interesting because of Neil being a psychiatrist, thinking that Charlie's going through some delusion, or eventually Scott is going through a delusion that he believes he's Santa Claus, and, going through all of that. How, Charlie is listening to Christmas music all year round. He's playing Santa in his room, and it's to a point where his mother and his stepfather are concerned and even wanting to take custody away from Scott because he's now a delusional man that believes he's Santa Claus.
It is, most of this movie is about the fact that Scott is not a very great dad, supposedly. But the thing is that I'm not really sure that it's Scott that's a bad dad. Because, good grief, the mom and the stepdad are kind of awful people. Am I the only one that watches this movie, especially as an adult, knowing how, these things sort of work, and go wow, you people are awful?
I never did, but I'm looking at it from the, again, the trope of the father who's never around and he's trying to overcompensate with his son. And I'm seeing it, again, my interpretation of it is just this mom who's just tired of her ex-husband's lies, tired of her ex-husband never being around, tired of her ex-husband just being a general pain in the butt, especially making jokes at the expense of her new husband.
Well, her new husband is kind of, that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott's not the greatest character in the world, but I'm gonna agree with him on that. The thing is we're not really shown that Scott is a absent father. We're kind of led to maybe believe it because the mom says it's true. And there's one or two lines where Charlie says things about oh yeah, it's stupid because I want to do it, or whatever. And he's sad because his dad doesn't want to do things that he wants to do. But the movie never really shows us Scott being a really bad dad. It's it shows him being a little bit late to pick up Charlie on Christmas Eve because of the office party. But here's the thing I'm going to say. The movie starts out with oh, this guy is a bad dad because he spends too much time at work and doesn't spend enough time with his son. And then the movie kind of ends with, and now the dad kind of has to leave and go be Santa Claus. And yeah, you're left with well, you can shake the snow globe at any point and your dad will show up and you can hang out with him. That's not quite the same as having your dad in your life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He's arguably gone more by the end of this first movie than he was at the beginning of the movie, when he was supposedly such an awful dad.
He's gone from being an executive at one company to being the CEO of Christmas.
Yeah. And there's a joke about well, Santa only works one day a year. But any movie that's about Santa Claus points out that, well, no, that's not true. Logistically, if Santa were really setting up all year for this one night delivery thing, that's a full year commitment in order to just get stuff delivered on one night,
Which the other movies reference. He is literally delegating the other elves to do jobs. The list, which we do see in the movie, all these packages, which is the list that he needs to check twice to make sure all of the kids are naughty or nice. So like, if anything, he now has more responsibility as Santa Claus than he did as a marketing executive for this toy company.
Yeah, and the thing is in Ernest Saves Christmas, Santa in there says, like, well, I don't have to deliver presents to every single child. It's really just children who, one, celebrate Christmas, and two, their Christmas celebration has Santa as part of their Christmas tradition.
Charlie does mention that when he's questioned by Neil. Well, how does he deliver to all the children? Well, not every child celebrates Christmas, and not every Christmas involves Santa. But you got to really pay attention to the kid.
Even so, they do reference that it's like millions and millions and millions of children, you know?
If anything, the previous Santa has put a lot of burden onto this guy. You have to uproot your entire life. You have 11 months to take care of all of your affairs in the human world so you can full-time move to the North Pole. In that 11 months, you also have to do the duties of Santa Claus, which involves checking the list, while you also have to be a father to your son. Also, the transformation into Santa Claus. You're gaining the weight, your hair is going gray, the beard is coming in, all of it.
Can we just take a moment to talk about how bad the special effects in this movie are?
The special effects haven't aged well. Like, of all of the effects that work, it's the puppet reindeer, the animatronic puppet reindeer, at least in this movie, work. I'm not going to talk about them in the other movies. But the CG that they use for Scott going into the chimneys and going into the other vents hasn't aged well, and it's really, really bad. But also the transformation scenes, like the part where he dyes his hair and shaves his beard and instantly goes back to being gray and the beard instantly comes back in. Again, a lot of that CG effect hasn't aged well because it's early 90s CG.
We've talked about other movies that were made around this time that their stuff has held up pretty decently. And yeah, it turns out this is not one of them.
The problem with Christmas movies is that you're not going to make a lot of money off a Christmas movie, because your movie really is only going to be relevant for 4 weeks out of the year. And most of these movies are going, especially at this point, are going to have minimum 3 months in the theater. So of the 3 months your movie's going to be in the theater, you're only going to really make money off one of those months. Putting a lot of money into really good CG and really good special effects, probably not the top priority. Just making a movie for a modest budget that you can make your money back in a few weeks. That's my explanation. You know, have you seen Red One with The Rock and J.K. Simmons?
Absolutely not.
I have. And Chris Evans is in that movie too. But they put a lot of money into that movie, a lot of special effects, a lot of CG. They were never going to make their money back on that movie because Christmas movies do not make a lot of money. That's why you got to make them cheap. That's why, you know, they're so cheaply made for the Hallmark Channel. You make your money back on the advertising that night. You put Jurassic Park level special effects in a Christmas movie, you're not going to make your money back. And we would have never gotten any of the other sequels. So keep it low, keep it cheap, keep it decent. That's going to work on a 1990s projector and a 1990s screen and a 1990s VHS tape and CRTV. Yeah, it'll be fine then, but watching it in high definition television on a big streaming service in the highest quality possible, yeah, those special effects aren't going to look that good.
The thing about this movie is that if you haven't seen it in a while, what you really remember about it is that, you know, he becomes Santa Claus and most of the movie is about him being Santa Claus. Except it's not. Most of the movie is about Tim Allen's character having to deal with his ex-wife and her horrible husband trying to take away his parental rights because they think that he is feeding into the delusion of their son that his dad is Santa Claus.
They even go in front of a judge, and Charlie tells the judge everything. My dad is Santa Claus. We went on the sleigh ride. We did all this. And the judge makes the call. It is in the best interests of the child that Scott has his parental rights taken away. No visitation, no nothing, because it's become dangerous for Charlie to keep believing in this delusion that his father is Santa Claus. And that is the real point of this movie, is a father trying desperately to keep his son in his life while, his ex-wife and her new husband are trying to move on. And it's just adding on. Like, you could have done the same movie without any of the Christmas stuff. So that is the main points of this movie, is Scott trying to be a good father, trying to hang on. In his mind, he's trying to do the right by his son. Like I said, take away the magic of it. It's a father trying to keep the magic of Christmas in his son. He doesn't want his son to lose his innocence just yet. We kind of talked about this when we talked about King of the Hill a couple of months ago. How Hank wanted to keep the magic of Halloween with Bobby. One final real Halloween before Bobby is too old to go trick-or-treating. And it's the same thing here. Take away the magic. Take away the entire this guy is Santa Claus stuff. And you have a father who wants one more real Christmas with his son. That the magic of Christmas is still there, that his son still believes in the magic of Santa Claus, of reindeer, of talking snowmen, of chestnuts roasting up an open fire, bowl full of jelly, everything that surrounds the Christmas spirit. He wants that for his son, if only for one more year. It just goes too far. And this kid has fallen obsessive into the Christmas, obsessive into my dad is Santa Claus. And when you have that with two people, and they make a point of this in the movie, how they were also young when they stopped believing in Santa Claus. How the mom was roughly Charlie's age when she stopped believing because she didn't get what she wanted for Christmas. How the stepdad stopped believing in Santa Claus when he was 3 years old because he didn't get what he wanted for Christmas. So they already lost the magic. Scott, obviously, he doesn't, the magic is back into him because he has become Santa Claus. But even if he didn't believe in Santa Claus before, he's trying to keep that in his son. He just wants one more year with his son as an innocent child. He doesn't like the idea of his son's classmates making fun of him for believing in Santa. But he wants to keep that magic there. And he may not be there all the time. He may lie. He may be late. He may be a sarcastic wise ass to deflect from his own insecurities, to go into the psychological side of this. But he's doing everything he can to be a good father. And when he's trying his best to be a good father, and they're telling him it's not enough, we're going to take your son away from you, that's heartbreaking. Even if you don't have kids, we don't have kids. I don't have kids. Kiki doesn't have kids. But at least you can empathize with Scott in that regard of, I am doing everything I can to do right by my family, and I'm still failing. That has to be a universal feeling. Right?
The thing is that they take away Scott's visitation rights because, it's dangerous for the kid. He's got this delusion about his dad or whatever. But there is no proof that Scott is being abusive in any way. There's no proof that the kid is not being taken care of when he's with his dad. Yeah, okay, keeping kids grounded in reality is always kind of the best thing, of course. I think both of us would agree on that. However, of all the delusions, let's say, a kid could believe about their parent, this has got to be like one of the mildest and least harmful, maybe, I could see how the judge might say, let's get the kid some therapy, maybe let's have supervised visitation for a while, but just to be like, well, this kid is obviously having some emotional problems, which is what they think because they don't have the full story. Okay, that's fine. I think most of us would think that if this happened to us in real life, So when Charlie starts telling everybody, like, my dad's Santa Claus, I think the normal thing would be like, okay, let's get the kid some therapy. Let's try to see, like, what he's compensating for and why. And then maybe also mandate that, like, Scott goes to therapy too. Like, if you think he's feeding into his child's delusion, is he doing it because he wants his child to think better of him? Is he doing it because he's trying to get back at his ex-wife? Is he trying to, like, what's the motivation there?
And the thing is, stepfather is a psychiatrist. He's a therapist himself. He would know this stuff. He's doing all of the jargon in the movie, and it's played up for laughs. It's played up antagonistic, which shows you what the writers think of therapy. But that's a different discussion for a different day. Now, granted, he wouldn't be an impartial party because he's so close to the situation. You could go around this. It's a similar situation. For someone who is that kind of a doctor, he's trying to push his own traumas onto Charlie. Like I said, he stopped believing in Santa Claus when he was 3 years old. The idea of Santa being real and Scott being Santa, his current wife's ex-husband, that guy, this jerk, the guy that makes fun of me for my profession, is Santa Claus? No, he's not Santa, Charlie. He can't be Santa. I won't believe that this jerk is Santa. It's too personal.
I have my problems with the way that the writers portray therapists, but also not every therapist is like a perfect person or anything, So some of them are kind of awful or weird or, will use jargon in a horrible thing. So I'm going to say that just taking Neil as Neil, okay, and not as indicative of all therapists, because we here on this podcast are very pro, please go get some therapy if you have access to it. But, just taking Neil as Neil, he's not very good at what he does. I am not going to say that Neil is indicative of all step-parents either, because I don't want to talk bad about step-parents. Step-parents are very important in the lives of a lot of children, and they are legitimate parents as well. But he is frequently getting in the way of Scott and Laura co-parenting their child. And as far as we know, he has not been kind of invited to make those decisions.
Which Scott mentions is like, if we're going to, take that Santa belief away from my son, I want to be involved in that. And it's just his ex-wife and her new husband made that decision independently.
Yeah, I mean, as a step-parent, he should be able to talk to his spouse about his feelings about, his stepchild privately, but maybe do not get into fights in front of the child about it. That's not great, There's even a thing at the beginning when Laura drops off Charlie and her and Scott get into a fight, and Charlie says, "Why are you always fighting?" Scott and Laura should maybe try not to fight in front of Charlie. But then when, like, Neil is also fighting with Scott and Laura about how Charlie should be parented in front of Charlie, it just feels like a massive overstep to me, you know? So, I don't know. I'm not, like, Scott is written to not be the most wonderful character specifically in this, but also Laura and Neil are not great people either. Like, none of the adults in this are really great, you know?
Yeah.
Charlie's pretty nice, and Bernard is the goat, but, like, the adults kind of suck in this movie in general, kind of until the end.
And then we get to, the big ending where oh, I'm Santa Claus. Oh, everything is good. And, Charlie and Scott get to have another Christmas ride together as the movie ends. I want to make one more, and I wanted to save this one for last because she's not really an actor anymore. And that is Judy the Elf, played by Paige Tamada, who was only 9 years old when she did this movie. She was a child actor, and pretty much when she became a teenager, she stopped acting. We've talked about that before. Sometimes kids like acting when they're young and they don't want to make it their profession. Not a problem. But because she stopped acting when she became a teenager, she wasn't in the other two Santa Claus's movies. She had stopped acting at that point. Until the Santa Clauses series. Paige Tamada came back and she played a server at a hot cocoa stand in a Santa Claus themed amusement park, which is a wink and a nod to the character of Judy in this movie, who has the hot cocoa for Scott. It's her own special recipe that she'd been making for 1,200 years. So I thought that was that was nice that she came out of retirement to do that one little cameo in the series.
I will say that she is part of one of the weirdest moments in this movie, which is where it seems that, like, Scott is maybe hitting on her.
But she's seeing someone and rapping.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he intended to hit on her because he kind of turns his head and says, wow. But, yeah. And I mentioned to Kiki that there are technically 3 Judys in this movie because we get Judy the waitress, we get Judy the elf, and we get Punch and Judy. The puppets in Santa Claus's bedroom are a Punch and Judy stage. So, on that, Kiki, does the Santa Claus have the magic?
Actually, I'm going to say yes on this one. I know that's rare for me for a Christmas movie, but yeah, it's a cute enough little movie. And unlike Ernest, it did make me laugh. So, yeah.
I'm going to say it does have the magic. I like that this is a bit more grounded than other Christmas movies that feature a real Santa Claus. And I kind of feel bad that the other movies, as well as the TV show, kind of go further into the fantastical part of Santa Claus, because I feel like if it stayed in this grounded framework that this movie starts with, the other movies would have been more memorable. If I'm going to come back to this franchise, I'm really just only going to be watching the first film, and there's a reason why the first film has stood the test of time, despite the special effects not holding up, despite some of the jokes being dated. This is still a nice modern, quote, quote, modern Santa movie. So yes, that movie definitely does have the magic. It's a holiday classic for a reason. Yeah. As for next week, well, there's just been something missing this holiday. And I've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks, and something's been missing. Something that usually happens around this time of year. And it took me a long time to get it. And then I looked into the corner of my room and I saw this box that we used to travel in. Do you remember when we used to travel in a box?
Was it blue, perchance?
Yeah, it was a blue box. We need to travel in this box again. We haven't traveled in this box in a very long time. Because it's not the holidays without Doctor Who. And we have not talked about Doctor Who in a very long time, especially when Doctor Who became part of Disney for a bit. Now that that partnership is coming to an end, and by the time this episode airs, a certain war between the land and the sea should have come to a conclusion. I think it's time to talk about the Disney era of Doctor Who. So we're going to fire up that TARDIS, and we are going to be talking about the Disney era of Doctor Who, the return of David Tennant and the run of Ncuti in a 2-part special. Part 1 coming next week, which will be talking about David Tennant as the 14th Doctor.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, and we hope everybody has had a Merry Christmas or a Happy Holiday of your choice. And we are going to leave you with the words of Rob Reiner. Silence in the face of authoritarianism is complicity. Speaking out is a patriotic act. Democracy doesn't defend itself. It requires participation, vigilance, and courage from ordinary people. Rob Reiner, may his memory be a blessing.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Keep the conversation going. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at Rewatching the Magic.
We are also on Blue Sky, rewatchingthemagic.bsky.social. And new episodes are available at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com and youtube.com/@rewatchingthemagic. Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
We know that right now, things are tough.
But in the words of Jim Henson, the only way the magic works is by hard work. But hard work can be fun.
Check out our show notes for ways that you can help.